Prateek, hi. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Ashu. Thank you so much for having me.
Prateek, I am particularly excited about the discussion that we're going to have today. Somebody rightly said that every company is eventually going to be a fintech company, right? And I personally believe that, right? Coming from a banking background and being a fintech enthusiast, I personally believe that. But before we jump to that, Prateek, I would want you to take us through your journey, right? You've had a very exciting career, right?
Yeah,
Before we dive into the session, it'd be lovely to know of some of the exciting parts of your journey.
thanks. So I think it's been a very interesting journey for me as well. I think when I initially started working, I had just out of engineering, I didn't know what to do,
Sure.
right? Joined a couple of call centers and things and did all sorts of odd jobs selling SIM cards, mobile phones for the first couple of, or rather few years, right?
Right.
Roaming around the streets of Pune and things. I think the turn probably in the career was when I joined Fullerton India, right? After all the odd jobs, I joined Fullerton to set up, that was my first financial services domain.
Okay.
So I joined Fullerton. I saw the medium or small players where you're funding. Shopkeepers or anybody who's less than 25,000 rupees kind of salaried guy, right? So the first thing I entered there and I saw there's so much we can do with financial services,
Right.
right? And India is absolutely underpenetrated because you didn't have access to that kind of data firsthand so far, right? Because in India, everybody is typically running after salaries, jobs, and you don't really have time to look at the rural part.
Sure.
So Fullerton India happened to me. When I entered there, I built their customer experience model. We scaled from about 200 to 800 branches. In this span of 2.5 years, I literally changed three profiles there, right? I quickly set up one thing, moved to digital. In fact, that time Paytm was not born also. So I
All right.
was working with 197 and introduced the first digital in Fullerton way back in 2008. So that got me excited about the combination of mass,
Right.
digital, and fast,
Right.
right? So Fullerton India happened, then Fullerton India. After Fullerton, I joined Bajaj Finance. We started from a shed at Bajaj Auto in Pune, right? And now you see how big is Bajaj Finance, right?
Right.
So working with Bajaj as well for about 2.5, 3 years, uh, again changing multiple roles. So I think in my journey, I've realized that I enter at not a 0 to 5 where the
Right.
company is building, but
Right.
my liking more lies where I enter the company at 5, where you have a product market fit, you have done certain stuff, and then I kind of mastered myself to be a scale up guy,
Right.
right? So build Bajaj Finance, change multiple roles there as well, right? From product to customer experience to the entire digital journey,
Right.
everything, right? EMI card and multiple products. I was kind of bored doing all the back end stuff, right? I mean,
Right.
I wanted to be in the front end role or the sales role and things. So I got an opportunity with Syngenta, which is the largest agrochemical company with about 500 million turnover in India, right?
Right.
Present in 99 countries.
Right.
So with Syngenta, I entered and kind of built the go-to-market strategy, the loyalty program, the business analytics, a lot of it for South Asia business.
Right.
That was again a very exciting role where if I come from a so-called sub 700 CIBIL, right,
Right.
to Bajaj Finance, which is 725 CIBIL and up,
Right.
to a Syngenta, which is completely a rural segment, right, working
Right.
with about 4 million retailers and farmers, 5 million farmers and distributors. So that these three major experiences in my life actually gave me a complete overview of the India ecosystem, right?
Right.
Where the digital played a very important role, the segment played a very important role, and the access, the mass, right? And that's where I think these three pillars in my career actually shaped up. And that is when around 2014-15 fintech happened, right?
Right.
And I realized that I had to move back from Pune to Mumbai, and I moved back to Mumbai with Indostar, and build the NBFC retail business, right? And the digital, and probably entered the fintech domain, right? Started learning how the fintech is
Sure.
happening, things. And past 7 years, if you see that, I've just built companies at scale, right? And last corporate role was with BharatPay as Chief Business Officer lending. Scaled from 8 lakh retailers to about 60 lakh last year.
Wow.
And build the lending business, and exited BharatPay last June, around May, June, right,
Right.
to start my own fintech advisory and investments. So currently I'm a angel investor, have over a dozen plus investments, work with 4 to 5 NBFCs with promoters, building the digital lending vertical for them, and advising all these NBFCs and fintechs. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Fantastic, Pradeep. That's a lot, right? And I think I mean, I've spent a reasonable amount of time in banking, right, with Standard Chartered and Deutsche Bank. And I think what I can tell you is it's difficult to get the kind of experience that you did, right? Typically, when you start to operate in a certain vertical, you get limited within that, and it's very difficult to sort of get a cross vertical exposure, right? And I think this conversation today will it'll be nice to have your views on some of those aspects, cross vertical aspects, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. I mean,
so
I
with,
mean, at one point in time, Ashu, I was thinking that whether I'm taking too much of risk by
right,
changing about 8 to 10 jobs, probably in just 18 years or so, right? And who will offer me a job, right? But I just went ahead of whatever I liked that moment of time.
sure,
If the guy was able to convince me what he's
sure,
building, and if I thought that I was value adding, right, I really didn't care. Right, what mattered to me was the excitement and the delivering things, right? So that's what I did, and I think that's something which is got me to where I am today.
interesting, Pratik. Pratik, so what is the last few years? There's a lot which has happened in the fintech ecosystem, right? I think last 3 years it's exploded, right? I personally like this comment by Angela Strange at Anderson Howard. And she said that every company will either be a fintech company, while it continues to offer what it does, right? What are your comments about that?
I think I completely agree to her, and even I have the similar sense that either you are a fintech company or you're not there.
Right,
Right, and if you see, and that's what's happening today, right? You might have had various hooks, right? I mean, it's the same customer who gets up in the morning, who
right,
uses probably a toothbrush of some FMCG company, and toothpaste, the breakfast, and digital payments to buy certain stuff, right? A brand to drive or something, right? So there is hook of every company. But if
sure,
you say that hook actually translates into some or the common things, right? So
right,
you would see certain very accepted trends, I would say, in India, which is payments, right?
right,
So payments, you have kind of Paytm, Phone Pay, Google Pay, etc., where once you're addicted, once you start using, right, that becomes your hook.
right,
Eventually you will go down in the app and you will say the same personal loan offering, same insurance offering, same cashback, same Zomato access. You have just two companies where I order food from, right?
right,
Zomato or Swiggy. Everybody else is mapped. So you can have various hooks now, right? Be it a food, free food, be it payments, be it insurance, be it taxi, anything. But eventually everybody is moving to fintech or financial services,
right.
where the money is. If you also
I
see,
think
Ashu, yeah, go ahead.
no, no, please, please.
So if you also see, everything currently is literally free, right?
Right,
You have free food from Zomato, Lazy Pay, Simple, right? You have free insurance from Zerodha. You
right,
have free MDR from BharatPay. You have everything free, right? Credit cards or free coins from Cred. Everything is free. But
right,
what is not free is loans,
right,
right? Even you get a 10 rupee insurance also free if you buy some product, but it never says free loans, right? So
right,
loans के लिए इंडिया में पैसा देता है बंदा,
right,
right? और अगर आप लोन दे रहे हो तो वो ये नहीं बोलेगा कि you know give it to me free, right? He will say this is probably costlier, you please reduce the rate of interest. So I
Hmm.
think fintech is the end goal to make money,
Right.
and that's where India gets excited about.
Okay, that's a very interesting point that you highlighted, right? I think you kind of covered the landscape in what you said, right? Of the Indian ecosystem. What I'm particularly interested to understand, what is it that has happened in the last 3 years that this explosion happened, right? This wasn't something, at this pace, it never happened, right? Banking was something which was, a very slow moving ecosystem, right? It was a very risk averse ecosystem. What has happened in the last few years that really changed this entire, the paradigm of offering loans, banking becoming smarter, digital adoption? What has happened, right? Is this something which has happened? Is this a policy side push which has really moved this, the entire landscape, or is this a consumer first play?
I think it's neither a policy push nor a consumer play. It's actually the investment which is coming,
Mhm.
right? If you see in last few years, you have large investments coming in,
Right.
right? Over like about almost 3.5, 3.7 billion kind of money, which is just behind UK and US investments, right, in
Right.
fintech industry. And where is this all money gone? If you see, almost 60 to 70% of this money is gone into building companies like Pine Labs, Phone Pay, Google,
Right.
Paytm, all of these, right? Large players which command the market right now.
Right.
So all this money is come here, and because of behavioral change, which is by cash giving a, so Indians are the smartest ones, right? I
Right.
mean, in the funny word, I call it jugaad, right? I
Right.
mean, before anything is there, you are able to find a trick or a reverse way to kind of dodge it, or I would say find out a solution which is beneficial on the top line as well as the
Mhm.
bottom line,
Right.
right? So all this money has gone in, and this is invested in just 5 to 6 companies who have changed the behavior of people in last few years, or rather more than few years, maybe 5 7 years, right? And by offering free, so you had a Paytm where you had initially the closed loop wallet,
Sure.
etc., etc.
Sure.
Then Phone Pay and everything. So I think NPCI changed the entire game plan with UPI as well.
Right.
So the market has really changed. The We never knew how many MSMEs were there, right,
Right.
or which who were active on the digital ecosystem. So I think this entire digital play clubbed with payment as a hook to start with, and riding onto payments,
Right.
everything else with Zomato coming in, Uber coming in, I think all of that has changed the entire ecosystem in India, right? And because this ecosystem change happened, we are the fastest ones to adapt, which is workable, which is top line, bottom line, and hence you could see more than 10,000 odd startups mushrooming in last few years in India,
Right.
right? And everybody was going to an engineering college 4 5 years back, right? Today it's a FOMO effect where
Right.
people love to say, I'm a college dropout, which
Right.
wasn't the case earlier.
Right.
Parents never used to. I mean, my parents pushed me so hard to be an engineer, right?
Sure.
So I don't see that happening today. I
Right.
mean, at 25 years age, I have invested in 3 startups where the guys are under 25.
Right.
So I
Uh,
think India is changing.
Pratik, how, I mean, from, I mean, what I can very clearly remember, is before 3 years and, 4 years, right? There was little which was happening on the front, right? Where you could have an integrated system, right? The API infrastructure didn't really exist, right? So if you had to, for example, uh, build a relationship with a certain institution, you'd have to go there and sort of pursue them about, the whole credibility aspect and so on and so forth, right? It was a very, very fragmented ecosystem, right? Do you think the API infrastructure, the availability of APIs or API first thought process, right? Saying that, listen, this is something which is available. There are certain checks and balances that, one has to sort of manage and maintain, where investors, they fill the gap for startups who are wanting to sort of build businesses. things like FLDG got defined in the process. Do you think these are some of the disruptions that really enabled all of this, right? And it sort of brought in this change where a lot of startups have now come up in the fintech space, right?
So I think these are all the byproducts of scaling up,
Okay.
right? Because people realize that if they want to take risk, first is that banks were very risk averse, right? They
Sure.
were not ready to lend. Now, if you want fintechs to lend, who takes care of the risk?
Right.
So a concept of FLDG came in,
Right.
right? So I think FLDG and all of these new terms, when FLDG got kind of to the edge, right, people started demanding crazy numbers
Sure.
and stuff, right? Then
Sure.
you had co-lending, right?
Right.
So I think these are just byproducts of scaling the businesses
Right.
and uh, doing the same stuff in a different way, right?
Right.
And talking to the ecosystem. So I think these are all the byproducts, and in future you will see multiple such products just coming in, because end game is all about giving credit, right? How you give with that 100 rupees, you give it to 100 people 1 rupee each, or you give it to two people, that is 50 rupees each.
Sure. Pratik, that brings me to a very interesting question, right? What has 2020 changed, right? 2020 has been a very difficult year, right? And 2021 again in India is, we are among, amid the second wave, right? It's a very, very difficult phase for us as a country, right? What did 2020 change, right? Did it bring back that risk sensitivity that financial institutions had because they were dealing with public funds? We are a very defensive country when it comes to, lending, right? And I think that's something which also saved us from a lot of global meltdown. Do you think that is something which has also impacted our decision making and will now sort of be all the more uh, strong when it comes to going out and building these co-lending products and is risk gonna be redefined, right? Is risk gonna be the primary parameter of building these relationships and scaling uh, you know uh, businesses that are into lending and fintech as a whole?
Not really, not really. I think risk is absolutely underrated, understated, right? And exaggerated. Or
Sure.
rather, you could say anything about risk, but it's actually not the risk which is a problem,
Okay.
right? In the name of risk, I think we have been kind of just going with the status quo, which has been traditional,
Right.
right? Because how much of data do you actually have?
Sure.
Right? I mean, if I ask you that, how many do you think that your bank is underwriting you correctly, right? And you are actually laughing it out, right? The income taxpayers and everybody who's saying that, or the SMEs, right? They're saying, hey, my bank doesn't even know what money I have. My bank doesn't even know what car I drive, or is able to offer to somebody something which is more personalized, right? We are all talking about personalization. So I think risk is something which people haven't really gone deeper into, and we have been very traditional in our banking approach.
Right.
And now it is getting somewhere redefined, where instead of giving large monies, right, to fewer people, I think we have understood that the the better risk understanding or the better risk implementation is giving smaller money to larger number of people,
Right.
right? So I think you see that shift change, that behavioral change in the BFSI ecosystem, right? You see everything being sachetized now, right? Where you have micro insurance, you have micro loans, instead of a 3-year loan which used to be probably 10 years 7 years back, right? It's still prevalent, but at least 5 years back, which was a 3-year or a 2-year loan, is now reduced to 3 months or a 6 months loan, right?
Right.
At slightly higher price, but a very high customer experience. You click 3 times or 4 times and you are done, right? Secondly, regulatory, I think a lot of things were different before pandemic, before 2020, right? We had all sorts of rules of going there, doing that, seeing the person. Only banks can do this, only NBFCs can do this, etc., etc.
Right.
At one point in time, even there was rumors or talks about, will fintechs replace the banks,
Right.
right? But that isn't the case now after 2020. I think
Right.
everybody's understood their roles and responsibilities, right? The regulator has absolutely understood that I need to draw a clear line between who does what, right?
Right.
So now you have reduced number of NBFCs with larger powers. You have clearly banks as winners who will supply funds. You have clear understanding between fintechs and banks where they have to do partnerships along with NBFCs,
Right.
right? So I think entire space has changed. The regulator has understood in 2020 that it can't be everything physical, right? You have to do digital. So some rules tweaking in KYC and other processes, right, has made actually fintechs thrive. Right. I mean,
Interesting.
within 2020 and 2021, you have seen a 400, $500 million company actually turning up to unicorn in just last 8 months.
So, Pratik, what I'm particularly, what I like in what you said, right, is that, from a traditional, mechanism of evaluating risk, which sort of most banks and financial institutions had, right, which was a very physical credit rating process that they had, right? It's moving into personalization, right, and that's only possible through digital, right?
Yes.
And the footprint that people now have, people are now leaving, right? And I think that is something which really sort of makes it very, very exciting, right? Because you're able to price risk depending on the behavior of the individual, right, and not necessarily really sort of put it in a certain stack and say that listen, this is how it's going to work, right? So I particularly like those bits in of what you said. I think what I particularly want to talk to you about is the micro piece that you spoke about, right? And I think micro is something a lot of businesses went after that because that was a category which was underserved, right? That was a category which didn't have the track record, the digital footprint which was required, for them to qualify for larger roles. People said, we are going to build up to it, right? We are going to give you the smaller loans, you continue to repay. There's a certain credit history that you've built in the process. And then you start to qualify for, bigger loans and stuff like that. I think that was the sensibility behind the micro play, right? And I think that was a clearly underserved opportunity, which I think most of the startups went after. And I think that's essentially what a lot of investors also funded, right? Saying that, listen, X amount of disbursement that you're going to do, 5, 7, 10% is going to go bad, delinquent, but the possibility of you having a base which you can cater to over a period of time is very, very high, right? So LTV is sort of kicked in, right, in that sense. No, I think some fantastic points that you highlighted, Pratik. My next question is that India has been a very, very fragmented market, right? While it's been a very, very underserved market, and unfortunately, that's the truth, right? But that's also become an opportunity, right? And I think most fintechs have really gone after that. Um, what have been some challenges, right, when you sort of are catering for a market which is as complex as India is? Um, there's something that I was involved in, at an which was in the fintech space, in the agri-tech space. It was intersection of fintech and agri-tech, right? And what we realized was that there is a massive dearth of information for lending to be possible, right? And that's very, very real, right? That's 2/3 the country. What are some of the key challenges that have been there for the fintech or the financial ecosystem to thrive, right? How is fintech solving that? Let me put it that.
So let's understand, where we are and what we need to do, or probably how did people think around it, right? If you see, India is absolutely high on understanding and upping the learning curve,
Right.
right? And every 3 to 4 years, if you divide India into the best possible people, or rather the rural, right, and you segment them into 5 to 6 different brackets, right? Every 5 years the lowest bracket actually is moving up the ladder with the second last, right, and the second last is moving to the third last.
Sure.
And this is opening up a massive segment, right?
Right.
And everybody in the top 2 to 3 layers have been catered to by banks, NBFCs, and other financial services, right? But
Right.
fintech obviously saw that this is a big under. I remember during my Fullerton days about 12 years back, right, we used to sit out of some MSMEs and the vegetable vendors and see how many receipts they cut, right? And they had this khata book and or a digital ledger, right?
Right.
Which they used to write, and then we used to count how many purchases were there, and the credit
Right.
manager used to underwrite those times those ways.
Right.
Now this is exactly what today's Yes, Khata book, right? That's why, right? Today's Khata book, OK Credit, and it's digital ledger, right? Which is
Right.
converted. So the market is the same. Earlier, you didn't have an Aadhaar, right? Today, you have an Aadhaar,
Right.
right? You have the KYC thing sorted. You have people who understand that now it's all about digital,
Right.
right? Here, people have understood that they don't have bank accounts, they don't keep money in their banks,
Right.
right? But they keep cash. So when you don't have data, where do you get data?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you didn't have you were NTC or new to credit, right? So
Right.
you didn't have a CIBIL score, you didn't have an experience score, you didn't have a digital track record, anything. So you had to build everything from scratch, and that is
Right.
a behavioral change. And
Right.
this investment actually activated all those behavioral changes.
Sure.
And when you don't have data, what is that scoring you will do on what? Right?
Right.
Face match, not possible, right?
Right.
So people started doing all of these things, and then you started building on that credit history. That, okay, fine, if you don't have a history, I'll give you smaller amounts. You start building your history, and
Right.
that's how it is building the next MSME wave, where you will see past 3 years the work which is done past 5 years, probably, I would say,
Right.
right? And I would give credit to actually the investments which have come in, and companies like PhonePe and Paytm especially, right, where they have activated this lower strata just on a 5,000 or a 7,000 rupee mobile phone,
Right.
right? The regulators who have given access to just bank account and you're good to go, rather than doing a
Right.
full KYC, etc.
Right.
So this started building, and now after 2 years with multi-billion transactions passing through, you
Sure.
have some place where you can start giving smaller amounts, let that guy repay that smaller
Correct.
amount, then you give him a bigger amount, right?
Correct.
And somebody who has deeper pockets and high risk appetite can even give a higher loan amounts,
Right.
right? So, and plus, if you give multiple products, right, if you're able to track that he's paying his phone bill through your app, he's paying
Right.
his electricity bill your app, he's accepting 10 different unique customers during the day, right, from 7 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock in the night, all
Sure.
of these data points act as an alternative underwriting mechanism, that yes,
Right.
this guy stays there, he does business there, he has not a negative credit history, but
Right.
a neutral one. I think
Sure.
this becomes a fantastic use case for building the MSME, which you can see now.
Interesting. Interesting. Pratik, one of the things that has happened is that there's a lot of conversation which has happened around loans, right, and lending, right. And I think to a large extent, fintech was essentially considered to be everything lending, right? And I think we weren't looking at a lot of other areas that had to go through that phase of digital transformation, and which opened up opportunities for startups to come in and build solutions, right? What are some of these areas that you've been particularly excited about, right? What are some of the other upcoming pieces within the fintech space that you're excited about?
So I think fintech can be further classified into lending tech, insurance, insure tech, wealth tech,
Sure.
you know, API banking, anything and everything, right?
Right.
So I think I am particularly excited about not the personal finance space, because that is very plain and simple, but something larger markets, which
Right.
is innovation in lending, right? Because even if you see, out of 95%, out of
Right.
100% lending which is happening right now, 90% is done by traditional banks in the traditional way, right?
Right.
Fintech contributes to just about 5-7%, which is increasing. I don't
Sure.
have the latest numbers, but these were last year numbers, right, during pandemic. So I think fintech is hyped, they're
Right.
doing great jobs, but if you see the total overall structure, right, it is still a very small number,
Right.
right? I think what is really going to change now is something in connected vehicles, right,
Mhm.
where I can see that connected vehicle is moving from a traditional buying a vehicle, parking it there, not having any analytics, to something like putting in IoT devices, tracking where the vehicle is, what is the engine, you can see everything on your app, what is the speed it you have driven, scoring the driver who is doing it, right? Based on all of this technology, you can offer better insurance policies, you can offer better products. In fact, just one of my recent investments, and I've joined their advisory board, where we're trying to create something where people can actually hire vehicle, just rather than ownership, they can just choose the vehicle. It will be delivered at your doorstep. You use
Right.
it for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever you want, right?
Sure.
And everything, right from maintenance to insurance to everything, is taken care by the fintech.
Right.
And based on your credit history. So I think this is what the future is. So connected vehicles is something which I'm particularly excited about. Right, I think MSME finance is something which is huge. MSME finance plus embedded finance also in the newer avatar, you could say, which makes sense, where you have so much of data that based on your data you will have offers popping up to where with your suppliers, with your distributors, you can discount. So today, if you see, Ashu, what happens, you are taking a loan from a bank or an NBFC, and eventually
Right.
75% of that loan goes to your supplier, right, or
Right.
your distributor, where you as an entrepreneur is buying some stuff, right,
Right.
to further retail it out. Now, can you at that juncture, can you finance that invoice,
Right.
right, is something which is going to happen.
Right.
Right, you have fintech SaaS also, which is coming big time, like
Sure.
all the SaaS products. Nobody wants to buy a license thing or something. Just go for a software as a service, right? Use it till the time you want it, and either you want to build it yourself or you want to buy a better version of it in the future, you can do that.
Sure.
Right, so I think all of these are particularly exciting, where it will attract a lot of money from the investors, as well as you can see entrepreneurs dedicating their time into it.
Very interesting. Pratik, you've touched on. I think what I can very safely say is Pratik is all about lending, right? I think the undertone of whatever you sort of talking about, I think goes on towards or is
You
skewed
take
towards
any route,
lending.
it will route to
Yeah, it's
lending.
it's
Is
skewed
that
towards
right?
lending, right? So,
Yeah.
and while you say that, I kind of, I hear you, right? I am particularly excited about the fact that, a lot of structures will now be possible, as we, of course, go on to build this digital track record, right? Where people can actually lend, organizations can actually lend, and people can consume a lot of these loans outside of a civil like ecosystem, right? Basis transactional history and stuff like that, and that the weighted or the weightages of that in the credit structures become larger, right? And then and two-dimensional scores become very small part of that entire process of lending, right? And I think some of these players are already doing that, right? BharatPe, for example, is in a way doing that, right? Where they have built solutions and where finance is available on whatever transactional history that you had, right? Credex is again doing it where they are bringing in basically if you have bills you want monies against that, they help you with a bill discounting instrument where people can come in on the other side and sort of buy it, right? Pratik, but that brings me to a question, right? How do you see P2P evolve, right? I mean, I am particularly very, very excited about it. There are a lot of people who've been talking about it. Unfortunately, it hasn't taken off, as it was supposed to. What are your thoughts about P2P?
P2P lending or P2P
Yes,
payments?
lending.
P2P lending, I think P2P lending is, as a business model, I think it's still getting evaluated. It's still getting
Right,
constructed,
right,
right? The simple funda of a P2P lending is you are a regulated marketplace platform, right?
right,
Where one side it's the borrower and the other side it's the lender or the investor,
right,
right? The lender decides, as a platform, you're supposed to showcase what is the borrow profile,
sure,
right? And you have an underwriting model where the lender takes the punt, and you are supposed to lend on that, take a punt on that borrower,
right,
right? And in the entire transaction, it is governed by a trustee, where the money goes through a trust,
sure,
etc., etc., right? So
sure,
I think it's all about lender and borrower, and platform plays a key role in underwriting and only suggesting,
right,
right? The entire profit loss, everything is the the investors' prerogative. So I think these models are still being built up, right?
Right.
What I hear is that there is a constant conversation of increasing the limits, which happened last year, which is from 10 lakhs to 50 lakhs, right? I myself have invested in one of the P2P platforms, right? So I think I'm watching it closely, but I think it's just too early days for this model to be said that this is the right model or this is the final model, because this is not how the international P2P market works. Indian
Okay.
P2P market is pretty different than the international ones, right?
Okay.
So I think there has to be some normalization, and I think just give it a couple of years more. I think it should get streamlined. But still,
Wow.
right now, it's a gray area for me.
Okay. Okay. Very interesting. I think there's a lot of there's a lot of discussion which is happening around open banking, right? There's a lot of discussion around open banking. There's a lot of money which is going into open banking. Tell us a little more about that. Help us understand a little more about that, right? What is what is the difference that these institutions are trying to bring, right? I think while we're still to see a lot of products take shape, come up, right? Just help us understand the landscape.
So I think open banking is, about partnerships, right? Open banking is all about somebody who's good at something. So somebody is good at, banks are good at probably raising the liability side,
Right.
right? The demand side, fintechs are good at,
Hmm.
and the technology side, right?
Hmm.
So I think open banking is something to check out for in future, where uh, you know all the innovation. See, if you understand fundamentally, anything which is more regulated can't be innovative,
Right.
right? And anything which is more innovative can't be 100% regulated,
Okay.
right? Because
That's
you
a
have an,
controversial. That's a controversial statement that you're making.
yeah, absolutely, right? Because if you are working within boundaries, right? So let it put it in simple words, right? That if you're working within boundaries, you have a limitation on what you can think around,
Right.
correct? But if you do not have a limitation of boundary, right, then you can think anything, right? And that is innovation. So I
Right.
think a fair combination of both is something which is open banking and neo banking, which is coming in,
Right.
right? Where you have defined roles and responsibilities from the demand side, from the underwriting side, from the supply side.
Okay.
When it's supply side, it's somebody who's providing capital for it.
Right.
When it's underwriting side, you are deciding what to give, whom to give, right? And when it's demand side, you are riding onto the technology and the millennials and probably the new ways of working and behavioral, right? So this is where fintechs are good at, right? And I think it's a great partnership model which is getting evolved.
Pratik, Pratik, is it safe to say it's evolved connected banking? While we continue to use phrases like open banking and neo banking, right? Is it
So
safe
it's
to say
all,
it's an
yeah, neo
integrated connected
banking.
banking, right? Because
Yes, yes.
banks operate in silos, right? One department doesn't really know what the other department is doing, and essentially the weaving factor becomes a Finacle like software, right? That you essentially use, right, to trace the kind of balances. But it's not a dynamic system, right? So are we talking about connected banking? Are we talking about a slightly more evolved, a dynamic ecosystem, right, where fund management happens automatically? You have, as you said, right, rightly said, that you're using a lot more data to do the underwriting processes, and then a lot of other options available, right, which are where you can move faster, right? So is open banking, connected banking, banking which with speed, is that going to be the differentiator?
Yes, absolutely. This is going to be differentiator, right? And see, once people have understood what their roles are,
Hmm.
right? And these roles are not self-defined. These
Hmm.
are defined by the ecosystem,
Right.
right? These are defined somewhere by the regulators. These
Sure.
are defined by the processes and policies,
Right.
right? I think people have started building something like OKENs, LSPs, embedded lending, you know uh, banking banking for MSMEs or millennials, or concentrating more on UI UX, right, being the in the framework. So I
Right.
think open banking is a version of all of these partnerships or API banking.
Okay. Very interesting. Pratik, there is a lot of work which has happened in savings, right? We've had a lot of companies that have come up in the savings space, right? And then there are there are players who are redefining how you invest, and then you have players like ET Money, and you have Grow, and you have so many players that are there in that category, right? And of course players like Zerodha, right, which are essentially doing the same thing but at a lower cost, right? Which and they help you move faster. They're completely digital or digital first, as we call them. There's another category which is coming up, right, which is fragmented ownership, right? How does this market look, right? How exciting does this market look? This is something which so India has one of the key gap areas has been our savings essentially being limited to largely bank deposits and FDs, right, and bullion, right, and real estate, right, as it sort of
And
evolved.
crypto.
I mean, okay, I have a view on crypto, right, and we'll come to that a little later. But yeah, I think traditionally we've done that, right. But a lot of these guys have picked it up in a beautiful way. They're doing a far superior job than what traditionally brokers have offered, IFAs have offered, financial institutions have offered, wealth management companies have offered. A lot of these guys are doing a much better job, right? How excited are you about this entire thing? How do you see it grow?
So I think I'm very, very excited, right?
Right.
uh, about all of these things. I think
Sure.
this is again a changing behavior which you can see, right?
Mhm.
Earlier, India as a country was credit stopped. It is still
Right.
credit stopped,
Right.
right? Savings wasn't the thing we used to do probably till the time we started earnings,
Sure.
right? I think micro saving is something which is picking up not only in the millennials, but micro savings is also in the gig economy with
Right.
all the fintechs, like especially I would say Swiggy, Zomato, kind of Dunzo,
Right.
kind of employees, right? So micro savings is something where people have understood that you can have similar pandemic in future.
Right.
You have to start saving for the rainy days, right? uh, People have traditionally in India saved gold, right?
Right.
While I was during my Bharat Pay days, while I was researching on the gold loan business, right, I figured out that gold, people keep one gold for actually just mortgaging it,
Right.
right? So you have one set of gold ornaments which is just for the lala to kind of you keep it to the jeweler and get the
Right.
money whenever
Right.
you want a working
It's,
capital or
it's for the
something.
it's for the it's for the rainy day.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So these kind of traditional ways of things, right? Now digital and mobile phone and geo, this data, this combination has triggered that you don't need to travel 10 kilometers for it. You don't need
Right.
to keep that gold in a safe, right? You
Sure.
can have a digital gold. So I think a micro savings product, slicing it out from your earnings, compounding interest, right? Payments banks, right? Which is much, much easier to open a bank account and start saving the same amount and getting the
Right.
similar rates on FDs, right?
Sure.
Alternative ways of investments, right? And that too for a different class of people, right? So different class have different alternative investment preferences,
Right.
right? So I think the gig economy is now moving, and that is the next 5 years thing, right? Because so much of money is coming in from there, and pandemic has given people a different perspective to start investing,
Right.
start looking at all of these things,
Sure.
right? So I think, and plus you have realized that you are no more excited about owning a house,
Right.
right? And I'm a firm believer that if I cannot practice it, I do not preach it, right?
Right.
So because I drive a rented car, okay, where I pay a monthly rental, right, with IoT and things where I've invested as well. That's pum pum pum. Okay,
Right.
I stay in a house which is rented. I
Right.
sold off my Pune house, which I owned fully, right, about 10 months back, right, just to invest in startups as well as save for the rainy day,
Right.
right? So I have zero ownership. Obviously
Mm-hmm.
I was not able to sell out the house where my parents are staying, otherwise how it is, right? So what I'm trying to say is that I believe that this is the future which is happening, right? This is the future where people do not want ownership, do not want to just keep paying taxes and maintenance bills, etc., etc. When you can when you can rent a house which is three times the same, three times in the same amount, right? Why buy it? Right. And I think one more also thing is that salaried individuals are paying higher taxes in a way, right? And you have only so much of savings. So I think that is also moving this fragmented ownership market. Plus, the thought process of I want to change it every few years, right? I want to upgrade because upgrades are available very fast. So I think with all of these things, the entire behavioral change is happening in the systemic behavioral change, I would say, right? And these are the new ways of working, new ways of living.
Interesting. I think a lot of interesting points that you highlighted. Right? When I hear you, and I of course there are certain points that I kind of agree with what you're saying, and then there are certain points that I think culturally we are there are certain things that are very very ingrained in us, right? So while we of course talk about moving to a subscription economy, I think that's still a little far away, right? Before we kind of jump onto it. I mean, there is definitely work which is happening. There's a certain shift which is happening. But I think where we have everything on a subscription, I think that is something which is
no, it will not happen. Everything
I
on
think
subscription,
what
right?
I'm particularly
But there are
excited.
green shoots.
Yeah, what I'm particularly excited about is to see instruments where ownership can be built while you utilize the asset, right? And not, for example, in the traditional way. Right. I think a couple of companies are trying to do that, right? Auto, for example, I'm particularly excited, right, with what they're trying to do. Right. And I think those are the kind of evolutions that I would want to see, when it comes to subscription and ownership and so on and so forth, right? Pratik, coming to my next question, right? I think fintech and so banking system and and banking and financial services as an ecosystem, right, has been very very technology savvy, right? And not just in the times of fintechs, but overall, right? They were the first adopters of technology, and they've continued to look at biometrics, and they've looked at what are the other solutions. There are trading platforms that had come very very early. There were settlement systems that were available on stock exchanges and so on and so forth, right? So this is an ecosystem which has really seen technology and just seen integration, right? What are some of the solutions that you think are we going to see in future, right? That you think are going to help this ecosystem become all the more sharper, right? What are some of those things that you're excited about?
So I think, as I said, right, that I'm excited about deep technology, right? I'm excited about not something which is uh, just. I mean, see, everybody
Integrated
calls
technology.
AIML.
Integrated technology. Yes.
No, I would say that, everybody's talking about AIML,
Right.
right? Now that AIML is a million codes or that AIML is 500 codes.
Sure.
Everything is under one thing, which is proprietary,
Right.
right? So I think when I look at a lot of startup founders and meet them, right, and try to probe what exactly they're building, I think what will really change the way we work is building some deeper solutions, which is still a long way to go, right? Something like, voice-based biometric, AI/ML underwriting. When you don't have the data, what are you talking about AI/ML underwriting, right? Where are you getting so much of data from? You have very thin layer data points, right, in India, and it'll still take a year or two, right, for people to start using that day in and out, right? An average active customer in every slide is just 2 transactions a month. That is
Right.
the minimum. Uh, uh, you know minimum criteria. So I think it needs to move into people's behaviors,
Right.
people's lifestyles and
Mm-hmm.
changes. So I think we are still a long way to go.
Mm-hmm.
India currently is running very fast, right?
Right.
And there is some kind of a FOMO, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is probably attracting a lot of money and attracting a lot of things, but eventually a combination of innovation, regulation, and sustainability and scalability. I think all of these things will have to be tick marked for us creating a sustainable unicorn, I would say. right?
Mhm.
So I think I would only say that all of these
Right.
words are so far just far-fetched, right? And you really need to work on them, and you would see men and difference between men and boys probably in another 12 months, right? Pandemic has given one set of filtration where half the fintechs uh, got wiped away, right? Because there was actually no fintech, right? But next 12 months again, you would see a lot of these deeper techs surviving, and something which is really value adding. So
I think. I think.
I
Yes, please.
wouldn't
Sorry.
say I wouldn't say that I'm very bullish so far, right? But I would say that it's the right time where market himself is underwriting and evaluating all of these solutions which are being offered, right? And you will see some changes in coming quarters.
I what I particularly like, and I actually love to probe you more, but on a different occasion, right? Where you said a sustainable unicorn, right? I think that's a big question mark, which is out there. I think the kind of
Hmm.
margins that we're working on, and I think the stickiness that is there in the product is, a lot of those sustainability possibilities there is a huge question mark on them, right? And you're kind of right. I think the trend is going to become clear in the next 12, 13 months, 14, 15 months, right? So next 2 years are going to be very, very interesting in that sense. So I completely agree with you on that bit. Uh, Pratik, you've been an advisor to a lot of companies. You've done it. You've been a practitioner. You've done it firsthand, right? Uh, and of course, in my earlier question, we covered this, right? And where you, of course, highlighted that some of the areas that you like, and you personally sort of invested in, right? What are some of the upcoming opportunities that you think, right? Crypto, for example, right? What are your thoughts on crypto, and the possibilities of it becoming, or it being imbibed by people at large?
See, I'm just thinking crypto, from a viewpoint that today our markets are operating in a certain time, right? It opens at 9:10 or 9:15 and closes at 3 o'clock or 3:30 something, right? I've not personally been a great fan of investments, right? Because I like things moving fast, right? जमता है तो double
I
up,
think I think what
नहीं
are what
जमता
are
है तो move on.
I think what our stock markets have done, I think you should be happy soul, right? I think they've given the speed.
Uh, yeah, I mean,
I mean,
but I think my expectation is slightly better off, right? That you can move faster,
right.
probably. So I think
And not only stock market.
yeah, yeah, and then recently I have watched
Right.
Harshad Mehta series, right, which gave me what happened 20 years back. And I was
Right.
comparing what is happening today, and then I'm comparing with the FOMO effect,
Right.
right, of the best actor and the Bollywood kind of, when I compare fintech, sometimes I also feel Bollywood is
Right.
kind of similar, right? The best guy is kind of the just there, everybody's after him, everybody wants to invest,
Right.
right? So I think and you have a great product as well, but it needs to be figured out. It needs to be that director come investor, he needs to find that right gem in
Right.
somewhere, who's building a product in Bangalore or Gurgaon or somewhere. So i
Right.
think i think if I say crypto, I am very positive about the structure,
Right.
because it's built on some technology which is not owned by somebody first.
Right.
It runs 24 by 7.
Right.
It's a global currency,
Right.
right? So just imagine you not having to carry your wallets when you are going outside India or anywhere,
Right.
right? You can pay via hundreds and thousands of coins, right? Anywhere and anytime, just using one wallet, right?
Mhm.
You can instead of investing in probably a stock or something, you can invest in the Bitcoin or crypto, right? And you can liquidate it anytime. And I think what I've heard is people have made great monies around it, right? I just had a small thread yesterday on LinkedIn also on it, right? I was just kind of being funny, but what happened with Dogecoin, right? So the point is that when you have a global currency in a global marketplace, when I can travel anywhere, play via one single currency anywhere in the world, right? And I don't have to really worry about my credit card, my MDR, my interchange, my Forex card, my banker, my relationship manager, right? I mean, why not then? Correct. So I think that's the kind of viewpoint I have. And I think it has to be, if not crypto, if not something, there has to be some global acceptance, which is not physical notes, right? Which takes away these hundreds of hops, right?
Right.
Which is as simple as anything.
Sure. I have a view on that, right? And while we'll not debate that on this particular session, but I very firmly believe when you lock the currency in a certain asset, right, or in a certain packet, right? Let's put it that way, okay? And that packet could be called gold, or that packet could be called diamonds, that packet could be called silver, whatever, right? Platinum, or stocks, right? There is a certain underlying, right? But when you put it into something which doesn't has an underlying, right, the underlying becomes how people consume it, and its requirement and stuff like that. There's something artificial about it, right? That just only adds to a lot of risk, right? So while I'm not against crypto, I very firmly believe that the underlying has to be a lot better defined, right? And I think unless that gets accepted as a global trade, within that
Mhm.
fraternity, by a certain, say, a government or a certain institution coming in and saying that, listen, this is how it's going to be, right? And this is something that we're adopting as a formal practice. I think it's going to move in a very, very different direction, right? Just that, few people packaging their savings, in a certain packet, and that packet is being valued at a certain price, might not be the right assessment metric for that particular asset, right? The possibility of people losing money is equally higher, right? And especially in a country which is like India, where we've saved in a very, very traditional way, in very, very little and less complex instruments. Crypto uh, could be a completely different ride,
No,
right?
absolutely. I
I
completely
think I think
agree to
my view
you.
is my view is that I think this is something that has to be sort of handled with caution. And I think if it's a fad, right, people lose money in fads, right? Like you said, Harshad Mehta, the scam play that you spoke about, right? This is essentially what happened, right? So I think the sensibility it has to be looked at from that standpoint. Where you question it in the right way. I
No,
think that's
absolutely.
that's my
Well,
view.
so I think your view is completely, underlined in my sense, right?
Sure.
So I also buy to what you're saying, right? When I
Right.
say that it is, so I'm talking about the structure, which is
Sure.
great, right?
Sure.
It carries those finer points that it needs to be regulated. There has to be some entity who's responsible for addressing the issues.
Sure.
There has to be some, recourse and things, right? And plus,
Mhm.
it is not that if you have 100 rupees you invest 100 rupees, right?
Sure.
That is not the right way. But today also people are investing in multiple alternative investment funds,
Right.
right? It can be one of the options, that too for a very small segment who understands this, right? I mean, we started our conversation with half the India, where they don't even have access to digital
Sure.
currency, right? So
Sure.
I think that is just the right way to do it. But trying, testing, never give away that learning, and
Interesting.
if you find it right with your contours, then yes, go ahead with it.
Very interesting. Pratik, my almost my last question to you for the session today is, what can the world learn from the Indian fintech ecosystem? I think what we've done in the last few years is absolutely phenomenal, right? I think a country of our size, what we've achieved, at least at a policy level, right? While of course, percolation
Absolutely.
takes time, given we are regional, there is a lot of regional diversity that we have. We are a complex economy. Our education ecosystem is not, for example, it's not horizontal, it's not homogeneous, right? It's also fragmented, across all of these regional, states that we have, right? What is the world? What can the world learn from the Indian fintech ecosystem?
I think for me, this is just the best time, right? I mean, literally, I have told you, right? I have invested my entire time, effort, and doing something which I love, right?
Sure.
Which is working with founders, taking them to 5 to 500 or 5 to 50 or whatever, right? Growth scale and this. And somebody wouldn't have committed if I was not bullish about it, right? I think this is just the right time where I see that the founders are, I mean, the young founders, I would say, are crazy on innovation, right? What they need is somebody to get some kind of experience and give them access to the network and the larger where that amazing product can be used, right? And India is a price sensitive market, right? So you
Right.
cannot expect great money out of it, but anything which can run in India can run anywhere in the world,
Right.
right? So you have mass, you have numbers, so all
Right.
the traction can come from India. You can get the money outside, when you take your product outside India.
Right.
That is first. Second is that I think we are intrinsically jugadu, right? Which makes us the best of minds, right, in India. And this is just the right time where you have an investor support who is riding onto the founder and the project and the product, right?
Right.
Nothing better can you ask for, right? You are building your dream on somebody else's money,
Right.
right? And both are hoping that you both will make money someday, right? So I think this is just the best time for anything and everything, I see. So this is just the place to be now. What you make out of it is up to you. So making a superficial FOMO driven product will not last, right? FOMO is, as you know, right, it's just for time being,
Sure.
right? But building scalable, sustainable, and regulated, never cross the line with the regulator, because ultimately he's the guy who will give you permission whether you are in or out, right? So I would say that innovate for masses, build great technology, but
Right.
again, don't be on the left hand side of the regulator, right? Try to be on the right hand side. And yeah, I mean, I am very bullish.
Fantastic. I think with that, you've answered my last question as well, which I had, right, which was about your advice to young founders, right, who are creating for the fintech ecosystem. Prateek, thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you with us today. Thank you for taking the time out. I look forward to having a deeper session with you across specific aspects. But thank you for doing this particular session, which was on the larger macros of the fintech ecosystem in India.
Thank you,
Uh,
Ashu.
I think some of your points that you highlighted, are very relevant, right? And they make so much more sense, right? And I think also the fact that the way we've evolved at a policy level, the way we moved, the way we've been able to bring in all the stakeholders together, I think international markets can learn so much more from what India has achieved, right? The fact that you can create a very very seamless structure. You can transfer money in 2 clicks. All of that is so much more easier, right? While we've been very very risk averse, I think with this evolved shape of banking, and the role that fintechs have played, we've become an extremely exciting economy, right? Pradeep, thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you with us.
Thank you, Ashu. It was absolutely a pleasure talking to you, and I think you picked up some very relevant questions, which which got exactly what I think, right? Rather than some gyan answers, right? So I truly enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. Thanks.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye bye.